A calm Sunday brunch in a five-star hotel turns into pure chaos when a mistress storms across the dining room and throws boiling coffee onto a pregnant woman. She thinks she can humiliate her in front of everyone. She thinks the husband will protect her, but she has no idea who is sitting 2 tables away, watching every second. Because the woman who witnesses it all is not just any guest. She is the one leader powerful enough to expose both the mistress and the corrupt CEO who defends her. What happens next is a collision of cruelty, strength, and public justice. And trust me, you will not believe the moment the entire room turns against them. Tell us what time you are watching and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. Morning light poured through the tall glass walls of the five-star hotel restaurant, spreading a warm glow across the room. It was one of those Sunday brunches that only the wealthy seem to enjoy. Crisp white tablecloths, polished silverware, fresh flowers arranged with mathematical precision. The soft hum of conversation drifted between the tables, mixing with the quiet clinks of champagne glasses and the rhythmic notes of a live piano. Everything about the space felt designed to make people forget the real world outside. Anna sat near the window where sunlight touched her shoulders. She wore a simple pastel dress that draped gently over her 6-month pregnant belly. One hand rested on the curve of her stomach with an instinctive protectiveness. Her other hand held a small water glass. She tried to appear calm, even though the stiffness in her posture betrayed the truth. She felt out of place in this crowd of designer outfits and diamond watches, but she had come anyway because Ethan insisted they attend. He said it would help with appearances. He said it would make them look united. But Ethan was nowhere near her now. He was across the room talking to the hotel director, smiling as if nothing in his life was wrong. Anna watched him for a moment, his gestures, his charm, the way he tilted his head while pretending to listen. It used to make her feel safe. Now it only made her feel small. She inhaled deeply and tried to focus on her orange juice. Her doctor told her she needed to keep her stress down. Her baby needed peace. Her hands rested again on her belly as she whispered to herself. Just breathe. Stay calm. It is only one brunch. You can do this. That fragile peace lasted less than 10 seconds. A sudden shift of energy rippled through the room, subtle at first, then stronger. It was the way conversations paused, the way heads turned, the way a few guests straightened in their seats as if sensing something uninvited entering their perfect little world. Anna felt it before she saw it. Clara was walking toward her. The mistress, the woman Ethan swore was just a misunderstanding. The woman who had suddenly appeared in pictures on his phone. The woman whose perfume sometimes lingered faintly on his suits. She was the kind of beauty that demanded attention, dressed in a sleek red dress that clung to her curves and shimmered each time she moved. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing through the dining room like warning shots. Anna's breath caught in her chest. Her fingers tightened around her water glass. Clara did not slow down. She did not hesitate. She did not even pretend to smile politely the way wealthy socialites do in public spaces. Her eyes were locked on Anna with a coldness so sharp it felt like a blade approaching skin. A waiter carrying a tray of pastries stepped aside quickly, nearly stumbling, but Clara did not even glance at him. She walked with purpose, a hunter closing in on prey. When she reached Anna's table, she stopped. There were no words of greeting, no attempt at subtlety. Only a cup of steaming hot coffee held loosely in Clara's manicured hand. Anna barely had time to part her lips before it happened. Clara tilted the cup, not slowly, not accidentally. It was a violent, calculated movement, the kind someone performs when they want to make sure there is no doubt about their intention. The entire cup of coffee poured straight onto Anna's chest and stomach. The liquid was scalding. It hit her skin through the thin fabric of her dress and spread fast, burning across her ribs, her belly, and down her thighs. Anna screamed before she could stop herself. Her chair pushed backward as her body jerked away from the heat. Her hands flew to her stomach, desperate to shield her baby from a danger she never could have predicted. The cup slipped from Clara's hand and shattered on the marble floor. Hot droplets splashed across the table. Silverware rattled. A plate tipped sideways and fell with a loud crash. The entire restaurant froze. Gasps erupted from every corner. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. A man stood so quickly his chair toppled over. The pianist's fingers stopped mid-note. Every eye turned toward Anna, toward Clara, toward the rising steam from the ruined cup on the floor. Anna's breath came in sharp, painful bursts. The heat still crawled across her skin like fire. She could feel her heartbeat pounding against her palm as she clutched her belly. Tears pooled instantly, but she blinked them back, trying to focus, trying to breathe. Clara stood over her with an expression that made the moment even more horrifying. There was no surprise on her face, no shock, no regret. Only a quiet satisfaction that curled at the corner of her lips. Guests whispered, "What happened? Oh my God, is she hurt? Did she do that on purpose?" Anna heard all of it, but the words blurred like echoes underwater. Her voice came out weak, trembling, barely audible. "Why? Why would you do that?" The room held its breath. Clara said nothing. And across the restaurant, Ethan finally turned around. Not because he felt his wife's pain, not because he sensed something was wrong, but because the entire room was staring at him now. And the nightmare had only begun. The burn hit Anna before her mind could catch up with what had happened. A wave of scalding pain rushed across her chest and stomach. The thin fabric of her dress clung to her skin, darkened by the hot coffee that soaked through instantly. She gasped, a sharp, broken sound that cut through the stunned silence. Her hands flew to her belly. She felt her heart hammering against her palm as fear shot through her entire body. Her baby. That was the only thought that mattered. Her breath came fast and shallow, like she could not pull enough air into her lungs. She leaned forward instinctively, curling protectively over her stomach, trying to shield the child inside her from the heat still crawling across her skin. Her chest tightened with both pain and panic. At the table next to her, an older woman reacted faster than anyone else. Her chair scraped loudly against the tile as she jumped to her feet. She rushed toward Anna with her arms outstretched, her face full of alarm. She did not hesitate. She placed her hands firmly on Anna's shoulders to steady her, and shouted with surprising strength that echoed through the entire dining room. "Get cold towels. Now. Someone bring ice. Hurry." Her voice snapped people out of their shock. A young hotel server dropped the tray he was holding and sprinted toward the kitchen area. Another server, trembling, nearly collided with him but followed immediately. Within seconds, someone returned with a cloth soaked in cold water. Another arrived with a bowl of ice wrapped inside napkins. Their hands shook as they presented the items to Anna, as if afraid they might hurt her further. The older woman guided Anna back into her chair slowly, carefully. Her touch was gentle but firm. She lifted Anna's hair away from her face and dabbed the cold cloth against the reddened areas on her chest. Steam still rose from the wet fabric. Every time the cloth touched her skin, Anna flinched, but the relief was immediate, even if only for a moment. "It is all right. Keep breathing. You are safe," the woman murmured, though her voice trembled with worry. A few guests stepped closer, forming a protective circle around Anna to block the view from anyone who wanted to film or gossip. One man whispered, "Give her some space. Let her breathe." Another woman asked if someone had checked her pulse or if an ambulance should be called. People reached out with water, napkins, anything they could think of, their faces tight with concern. But not everyone reacted with compassion. Across the room, several guests remained frozen where they Saturday. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, their mouths slightly open. Some held their phones up without thinking, recording the chaotic aftermath as if their bodies moved on instinct. A few covered their mouths in shock but did nothing else. They simply watched, unable to process the cruelty they had witnessed. Anna could feel all of it. The pity, the horror, the judgment, the confusion. It pressed down on her like a heavy weight and made her chest tighten even more. Her eyes filled with tears, blurring the faces in front of her. She tried to blink them away, but more came. Her voice shook as she finally managed to speak, barely louder than a whisper. Why would she do that? Why would she do something like that? The older woman leaned closer so Anna would not have to strain her voice. "I do not know, sweetheart, but you are not alone. We are here. Focus on your breathing." Anna nodded weakly. She pressed the cloth to her chest, while another server gently placed the wrapped ice on her forearm so she could adjust the temperature herself. The burn stung, then cooled, then stung again. It was a cycle of pain and relief that washed through her body in waves. The room around her buzzed with frantic energy. Some people called out for the manager. Others asked if the police should be notified. Someone demanded to know what had been in the cup. Another insisted that the mistress should be removed from the restaurant entirely. Voices overlapped, rose, fell, and clashed with each other. The piano player stepped away from his bench. A bartender stopped pouring a drink. A cluster of waiters exchanged panicked looks, unsure whether they should intervene or step back. In the middle of all that noise, one sound stood out clearly. It was the shaky exhale that escaped from Anna's lips. She tried to hold herself together, but her entire body trembled. Her stomach tightened under her hand, not from pain, but from fear. What if the shock affected the baby? What if the heat had been too much? What if something was wrong inside her, and she could not feel it yet? "I need to sit up straight," she whispered, trying to adjust her posture to breathe more steadily. The older woman gently supported her back and helped her sit upright. "Good. Keep inhaling slowly. Hold it. Exhale. You are doing well." A few of the surrounding guests repeated the instructions softly, as if sharing the calm with her. Still, not every eye in the room carried kindness. Some watched with judgment, whispering behind their hands. Some simply watched with morbid fascination. Some seemed to be calculating what the incident would mean for their brunch, their comfort, their social plans. But the group around Anna remained focused on her, shielding her from the worst of the attention. The chaos spread like ripples in a pond. Conversations rose in fragments. Was she burned badly? Should we call emergency services? I cannot believe someone would do that to a pregnant woman. Where is her husband? The older woman frowned as she glanced around. Where is the man who came with you? She asked. Anna swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. Her voice barely made it out. He is here, somewhere. Then, the woman pressed her lips together, as if she already understood everything without needing further explanation. Anna's eyes flickered toward the center of the room. Her gaze moved past the servers, past the cluster of shocked guests, past the spilled coffee and shattered porcelain on the floor. She was searching for him, but he had not come. Not yet. And the room, filled with both help and helplessness, braced for what would happen next. At first, Anna thought the room was spinning, the pain from the burn, the panic rising in her chest, and the noise of guests talking over each other all blended into a blur of sound and movement. She pressed the cold cloth harder against her skin and tried to steady her breathing. Her vision wavered, but she kept looking desperately toward the center of the restaurant. She was waiting for one person. Ethan, her husband, the father of the child growing inside her. The man she believed would run to her the moment he heard her cry out. Finally, she saw him. Ethan pushed through the crowd with long, quick strides. His expensive suit jacket flared behind him as he cut a path toward the chaos. His expression was tight with anger, but it was not the anger Anna expected. It was not fear for her. It was not concern for the baby. It was something colder, something sharper. For a second, Anna felt a flicker of hope anyway. Maybe he would take her hand. Maybe he would kneel beside her. Maybe he would help her stand and shout at the woman who attacked her. She waited for that moment the way a drowning person waits for air. But Ethan never looked at her. Not once. Instead, he walked straight past Anna, as if she were an inconvenience on the floor. He stopped in front of Clara, standing between the mistress and the group of guests who were staring in outrage. His arms spread slightly, shielding Clara with his body like she was the victim who needed protection. Anna's breath caught. She felt her chest tighten, as if someone had pressed a heavy stone against her lungs. She gripped the edge of the table with one hand, confused and trembling. Ethan's first words sliced through the room like a knife. "Anna, what did you do?" It was not a question. It was an accusation. The guests who had rushed to help Anna froze. The older woman who supported her straightened slowly in disbelief. Even the servers stepped back as if they were suddenly intruding on something toxic and dangerous. Anna opened her mouth, but nothing came out but air. She shook her head, hurt and stunned. "Ethan, I did not." She threw it. She threw the coffee at me. Ethan barked a harsh, humorless laugh. "So now you are blaming her. In front of all these people." He turned and placed a protective hand on Clara's arm. Clara immediately leaned into him, lowering her head into a posture of trembling innocence. She even let out a shaky breath, pretending she was the one who had barely escaped harm. It was a performance worthy of an actress. "She was yelling at me," Clara whispered loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I felt threatened. I did not know what she would do." Anna's eyes widened. The pain in her chest changed from physical to emotional, sharp and paralyzing. She looked at Clara with disbelief. She had not yelled. She had not even stood up before the coffee hit her. But now Clara's trembling voice and wounded expression were filling the space with lies. Ethan turned his gaze back to Anna, his jaw tight with anger. "You are pregnant, Anna. You cannot afford tantrums. You cannot afford scenes like this. You need to control yourself." A collective gasp rippled across the room. Guests stared at Ethan with disgust. One man muttered under his breath. A woman covered her chest with her hand, horrified. No one could understand how a husband could ignore the wife who was burned, and instead comfort the woman who injured her. But Ethan did not see any of it, or he did not care. He stepped closer to Clara and adjusted her hair away from her face with a softness Anna had not felt from him in months. Clara looked up at Ethan with glassy eyes, her voice trembling just enough to seem believable. "I did not want to ruin the brunch. I did not want anyone to see us fight. I am so sorry." "It is all right," Ethan whispered to her. "I am here." The older woman beside Anna took a breath, ready to step forward and speak. But Ethan shot her a look so sharp she stopped in place. "This is a private matter," Ethan said loudly. "Everyone needs to calm down." "No," the older woman countered softly. "Your wife is hurt." "It was nothing," Ethan snapped. "She is exaggerating. She always exaggerates." Anna flinched at the word. Exaggerating. As if the burn on her skin and the fear in her heart were inventions. As if her pain was a burden to him. As if she was a child misbehaving in public rather than a woman who had just been assaulted. Clara moved closer to Ethan again, clutching his arm. "I just want peace. I did not mean to cause trouble." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders in full view of the entire restaurant. That image hit Anna harder than the burn, harder than the boiling coffee, harder than any insult could. Her husband holding the woman who attacked her. Her husband protecting the woman who hurt their unborn child. Her husband turning his back on her completely. Around them, whispers grew sharper. Is he serious? He is defending the mistress. She is the one who was burned. What kind of man does that? But Ethan seemed immune to shame. He stood tall, confident, unmoved by the horror he created. His loyalty was clear. His choice was clear. And Anna felt something inside her crack in a way she could never repair. She pulled the cloth away from her chest for a moment and looked down at the angry reddish patches on her skin. Then she looked back at Ethan. He was not looking at her. He was soothing Clara, whispering something only she could hear. Clara's smile returned, small, satisfied, triumphant. The guests who surrounded Anna stared at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a man who abandoned his pregnant wife in the moment she needed him most. Anna whispered again, her voice barely more than breath. "Ethan, she hurt me." He did not turn around. Not even once. And in that moment, every person in the room understood the truth. He had chosen the mistress. And he had left his pregnant wife completely alone. Everything around Anna felt muted, as if the world had been wrapped in cotton. Voices drifted in and out. The pain of the burn throbbed across her chest in steady, pulsing waves. She kept her hand on her stomach, whispering inside her mind that the baby was safe, that she would not let fear take over. The older woman stayed beside her, rubbing small circles between her shoulder blades to help her breathe. But as the chaos settled into whispers and gasps, another presence pressed closer. Clara. The mistress moved with calculated grace. The moment Ethan turned his back to confront a manager who rushed in, Clara stepped away from his side. She walked toward Anna slowly, smoothly, as if she was simply adjusting herself or checking on the situation. Her red dress shimmered under the afternoon light. The expression on her face did not match the pretend fear she had worn only moments earlier. This time, her lips curled upward with a confidence so sharp it could cut skin. Anna tensed. Her breath hitched. She felt the subtle shift in the air around her. The older woman who had helped her noticed Clara approaching and took a half step forward, ready to intervene. But Clara lifted her hand with a calm smile. "It is all right," Clara said politely, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I only want to help her pick up the napkins she dropped." The older woman hesitated. The servers hesitated. The guests watching hesitated. Nothing about Clara looked threatening from the outside. Her tone was gentle, her posture relaxed. She wore the face of someone trying to assist a pregnant woman in distress. She leaned down slowly, pretending to gather the fallen napkins from the floor near Anna's feet. Her hair fell forward, creating a physical curtain between herself and the rest of the room. Anna watched her with confusion and dread. Then Clara shifted closer. She leaned in until her lips were just inches from Anna's ear. Her perfume, sweet and overwhelming, filled the space between them. The look on her face changed instantly into something cold, poisonous, and triumphant. Her voice dropped to a whisper that sliced straight through Anna's trembling heart. "He was with me last night," Clara murmured. Not you. Anna froze. Every muscle in her body tightened at once. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. Her breath disappeared completely for several seconds, leaving her chest aching. She stared at the table, unable to look up or respond. The words hit her harder than the burning coffee. Harder than the betrayal she had feared but never fully accepted until now. Clara continued. Her whisper turned softer, but every syllable landed with perfect cruelty. He chose me, she said slowly. He always chooses me. Then, with the skill of someone who knew exactly how to destroy another person without anyone noticing, Clara shifted her wrist. The light from the window caught on a piece of jewelry Anna had never seen before. A delicate bracelet. Silver, thin, elegant, with two small diamonds shaped like teardrops. It gleamed with newness. Not a single scratch. Anna recognized Ethan's taste instantly. He used to buy her gifts like that. Before everything changed. Before the distance. Before Clara. A tremor ran through her stomach. She pressed her fingertips to the cooled cloth on her chest to steady herself, but her mind spun too quickly for her body to catch up. Clara saw the tremble and smiled. This was a gift, she whispered. He said it reminded him of me. The pain behind Anna's ribcage deepened. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Her eyes burned from the heat of the coffee and from something deeper, something raw and emotional that she had buried for months. She wanted to stand. She wanted to walk away, but her legs would not move. Clara bent down even further, hiding her actions from everyone else. She slipped her phone from her small purse. With a calculated tilt of her wrist, she angled the screen toward Anna. Only Anna. Not a single other person could see it from their position. A photo filled the screen. Clara in a silk robe, leaning into Ethan's chest. Ethan's hand around her waist. A hotel room behind them. Soft lighting. Rumpled sheets. Clara's smile. Ethan's smirk. Anna's stomach twisted. Clara whispered softly, "He did not want me to post it. He was afraid it would ruin his image. But he likes being with me. You know that, right?" Anna shook her head weakly, trying to look away, but Clara moved the phone slightly to block her view of the table again. She made sure Anna saw the image. She made sure Anna understood exactly what she was doing. From the outside, the scene looked polite, gentle, civil. Guests saw Clara kneeling beside Anna, collecting napkins and offering quiet words of comfort. There was no raised voice, no sudden motions. Nothing suspicious. Just two women speaking softly while the chaos settled around them. But inside that quiet bubble, pain stabbed straight through Anna's chest. It felt like a knife made of ice and fire at the same time. Slow, deep, precise. Clara leaned in until her lips brushed the side of Anna's cheek, not in affection but in dominance. "You should leave," she whispered. "He does not want you here." Anna felt her throat tighten until breathing hurt. Every sound in the restaurant grew distant. Her heartbeat thudded heavily in her ears. The cold cloth on her chest no longer soothed the burn, because another wound had opened inside her, one that ice could never cool. Clara lifted her head with a pleasant smile, slipped her phone back into her purse, and rose to her feet. She smoothed her dress and stepped back just enough to fall into Ethan's line of sight. Ethan turned toward her instantly. He placed a hand gently on her back, the way he used to do with Anna once upon a time. From the outside, it looked like Clara had simply helped pick up a few fallen napkins. But Anna knew the truth. She had just been stabbed with a weapon no one else could see. And Clara walked away smiling. The room had begun to settle into an uneasy silence. Not a calm silence, but the sharp, brittle kind that forms right before something worse happens. Anna sat trembling in her chair with the cold cloth pressed to her chest, trying to steady her breath while the burn pulsed beneath her skin. The older woman stayed beside her, rubbing her back gently, but even she looked shaken by everything she had just witnessed. Across the room, Ethan finished reassuring Clara, or rather, finished reassuring himself that Clara's version of the truth was the correct one. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff, his breath sharp in the way it always was when his ego felt threatened. When he turned back toward Anna, the entire energy around him shifted. It grew darker, harder, more dangerous. He approached the table with long, angry strides, and the guests nearby instinctively stepped back, giving him space the way people do around someone unpredictable. His footsteps echoed on the polished marble floor. When he reached Anna, he stopped. The look in his eyes was not concern for his pregnant wife. It was fury for the embarrassment he believed she caused him. Then, without warning, Ethan slammed his hand down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Plates rattled. A fork bounced. Anna flinched violently. The older woman gasped. Several guests jerked their heads up, startled by the sudden burst of aggression. For a moment, silence swallowed everything. Ethan leaned forward, lowering his face until it hovered inches from Anna's. His breath was warm. His eyes were sharp. His voice was low, but heavy with anger. He spoke through gritted teeth, each word dripping with contempt. "If you make a scene again, I will freeze every account you have." Anna's heart dropped. She stared at him with wide, trembling eyes, unable to process that the man she had trusted, the man she had married, was threatening her in public. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Her mind was too clouded with shock. Ethan kept going, growing harsher with each word. "Do you understand me? Everything you own is tied to me. Every card, every account, every dollar. If you embarrass me in front of these people, I will shut all of it down today." The cruelty in his tone rippled through the guests. A soft gasp rose from a nearby table. Another woman whispered, "My God, she is pregnant." Someone else muttered, "This is unbelievable." The air inside the restaurant grew heavier as people realized what they were witnessing was not a marital argument. It was a threat, a real one. Anna swallowed hard. The cloth in her hand slipped slightly as her fingers trembled. She could barely breathe. The threat was not just about money. It was about survival, her prenatal care, her stability, her home, her future, her baby. Ethan leaned even closer. "I am warning you, Anna. You will not ruin my reputation because you cannot control your emotions." The older woman beside Anna finally stepped forward. She squared her shoulders and placed one protective hand on Anna's arm. Her voice was steady, but her fear was obvious. "That is enough," she said quietly. Ethan turned his head slowly toward her. His expression hardened. "Stay out of my marriage." "It stopped being private the moment your wife was burned," the woman replied. But her voice faltered under the intensity of Ethan's glare. Ethan scoffed and looked back at Anna with cold disgust. "You always wanted attention. Congratulations, you have it now." His words carved themselves into Anna's chest. She felt tears burn her eyes but held them back. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. She tried to inhale gently, but the breath caught halfway and shuddered out of her. Ethan straightened his posture and smoothed his jacket with the back of his hand, as if he had just finished something unpleasant and was ready to move on. Clara stepped forward at that exact moment, sliding seamlessly back into his side like a shadow returning to its source. Clara folded her arms across her chest. Her expression softened into something smug, nearly victorious. She tilted her head and looked at Anna with a faint, taunting smile. The kind of smile someone wears only after they realize they have won a battle the other person did not even know they were fighting. The guests noticed it. A few exchanged looks of disgust. One older gentleman shook his head. A younger woman whispered under her breath, "She is enjoying this." But Clara did not care who saw the truth hidden in her eyes. She only cared that Anna saw it. And Anna did. She saw the pride. She saw the satisfaction. She saw the quiet declaration that Clara had won Ethan's loyalty and now held the power Anna once had. It stung worse than the burn on her skin. Ethan rested a hand on Clara's shoulder as if confirming that he chose her. He turned slightly to address the surrounding guests, raising his chin in an attempt to reclaim control of the situation. "Everything is fine," he said sharply. "My wife overreacted. We will handle this privately." The crowd reacted with visible disgust. A few guests stepped away. One woman whispered loudly, "She is literally burned." Another man shook his head and muttered, "He is a monster." Ethan ignored them. He pointed at Anna with a cold finality in his voice. "If you do anything else to embarrass me, you will regret it." Anna's breath shivered. She felt like the room was closing in on her. Her ribs tightened with every inhale. Her fingers curled around the edge of her chair, as if gripping it might keep her from collapsing under the weight of humiliation and fear. Clara brushed a piece of hair over her shoulder and smiled again, confident and satisfied. She knew Ethan had shown his side. She knew he would protect her, and she knew Anna had no protection at all. In that moment, surrounded by strangers, pain, and betrayal, Anna realized something devastating. Her husband had not only abandoned her, he had become her enemy. The atmosphere inside the restaurant had already cracked. The air felt heavy, almost vibrating with tension. Guests held their breath, unsure whether to speak, whether to intervene. or whether they were witnessing something too cruel to be real. Anna sat trembling in her chair, clutching the cold cloth to her chest while trying to force her breath to steady. Her skin throbbed, her heart raced. Her baby kicked once, then stilled, as if sensing the fear radiating through her body. Ethan stood in front of her with a storm in his eyes, the kind of rage that never asked for truth before striking. Clara stayed close behind him, her smile faint and poisonous. The older woman who had helped Anna remained at her side, but she looked terrified. She seemed to know that something worse was coming, something she might not be able to stop. Then it happened. Ethan grabbed Anna's arm. Not gently, not out of concern or urgency. His fingers wrapped around her upper arm like a clamp. His grip was so harsh that her skin immediately reddened beneath it. He yanked her toward him with a force that startled the tables nearby. The motion ripped the cold cloth from her hands and sent it falling to the floor. Anna gasped in pain. Her body lurched forward. Her breath caught in her throat. Her feet slid across the marble tile, and she struggled to keep her balance. Her knees wobbled beneath her, weakened from shock and fear. She tried to steady herself, but Ethan's pull was too sudden and too harsh. "Stand up," Ethan barked. "You are making a fool of yourself." His voice cut through the room like a blade. Heads whipped toward them. A fork dropped loudly against a plate in the distance. Someone whispered, "Dear God." Another voice said, "She is pregnant. Stop him." But Ethan did not stop. His grip tightened, and Anna let out a small cry. She tried to pull her arm away. "Please. You are hurting me," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. He ignored her. He pulled harder. Her heel slid on the polished floor. Her knee bent awkwardly. She nearly fell forward entirely, but she caught herself on the edge of the table with both hands. The table shook under her weight, and a glass tipped over, spilling water across the white tablecloth. The older woman beside her grabbed Anna's free arm. "Stop this," the woman said sharply. "She is pregnant." "No." Ethan shot the woman a look of pure venom. "Stay out of this." And then, as if the cruelty in the moment was not enough, Clara stepped in. Clara moved behind Anna. Her face remained calm, almost serene, as if she were adjusting her dress or simply shifting her weight. No one would have noticed except for the intent in Clara's eyes. She leaned forward slightly, placed her hand on Anna's shoulder, and gave a small, deliberate push. It was not violent. It was not dramatic. It was subtle, silent, precise. But it was enough. Anna's weakened body could not fight gravity. Her knees buckled. Her arms shook. The cold towel lay forgotten on the floor. She pitched forward, unable to catch herself this time. Her knees slammed onto the marble tile with a painful thud. The sound echoed across the restaurant. Guests flinched. A woman gasped loudly and covered her mouth. A man stood up so fast, his chair scraped back and toppled over. Anna fell fully onto her knees, then onto one hand, cradling her belly with the other. A sharp pain shot up her leg. Her chest tightened. Her breathing broke apart, each inhale jagged and weak. She could not even scream. The humiliation and physical pain combined into something that choked her voice completely. She knelt on the cold, unforgiving stone floor in front of her husband's mistress, and the wealthiest guests in the city. A collective sound rippled around the room, a rising wave of shock. "Ah! Oh my God! Did he just do that?" She fell. She fell hard. "Someone help her." From the VIP tables, phones rose into the air. Not just to take photos, to go live. The first live stream notification pinged loudly. Then another, then 3 more. Lights from multiple screens flickered across the marble floor as guests lifted their phones higher, capturing every detail of the scene unfolding. Some stood on their chairs to get a clearer angle. The humiliation was no longer contained to a single room. It was now slipping out across social media, unstoppable and immediate. Anna curled protectively over her belly. Tears streamed down her face. Her hand trembled as she placed it firmly over her stomach to shield her baby from further harm. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Her eyes blurred with pain that went beyond physical. The older woman knelt beside her, placing both hands gently on Anna's back. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Breathe. You need to breathe." But Anna could not focus. The cold marble seeped into her knees. The pain burned up her arm where Ethan had grabbed her. Her vision spun in circles. The room tilted. She felt both hot and cold at the same time. Around her, the whispers grew louder. "She is pregnant. This is abuse. Someone call security. This is insane. Is he really just standing there? She could lose the baby." This is cruel. I am filming this. No. Ethan took a step back. He looked around and finally noticed the cameras. He adjusted his jacket, smoothing the fabric as if that could erase what had just happened. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not concern. It was fear, the fear of losing control. Clara, meanwhile, simply folded her arms. She looked down at Anna with the same soft, satisfied smile she had worn earlier. A smile that told the truth clearly. This was the moment Clara wanted. Anna lifted her head slowly, her cheeks streaked with tears, her lips trembling. She met Clara's eyes. She met Ethan's. For the first time, she saw both of them for who they truly were. Not illusions, not excuses, not hopes of change. Just cruelty. Pure, deliberate cruelty. Her voice escaped her in a fragile whisper only the closest guests could hear. My baby. That whisper traveled across the room like a spark in a dry field. Every guest felt it. Every guest recoiled. Every guest realized that what they were witnessing was no longer scandal. It was danger. And the entire dining room erupted into chaos. For a long second, the world seemed frozen around Anna. She knelt on the marble floor with her hand over her stomach, her breath shaking, her knees burning from the impact. The coldness of the tile seeped through her skin. Pain radiated through her body in pulses. Shock throbbed through her chest. Tears blurred her vision. Voices swirled in the background, overlapping in a chaotic haze of concern, disbelief, and anger. But beneath all that noise, something inside her shifted. It began as a faint spark. Small, weak, nearly invisible. A flicker of something she thought she had lost. Strength, dignity, rage. A voice inside her whispered that she was not a victim on the floor. She was a mother, a woman, a human being who deserved better than humiliation at the hands of the two people who betrayed her most. Her fingers pressed firmly against the cold tile. She braced her palm and tried to push herself up, but her muscles trembled violently. She inhaled shakily, gathering what little strength she had. The older woman beside her leaned in. Sweetheart, stay still. You just fell hard. Take a moment. Anna shook her head slowly. I can stand, she whispered, even though her voice quivered. She placed her other hand on the floor and shifted her weight. Her body protested instantly, with sharp stings through her legs and shoulders. Her burned skin throbbed under the ruined fabric of her dress. But she pushed anyway. Inch by inch, she lifted herself from the ground. Her arms wobbled, her knees trembled, her breathing staggered. People around her gasped softly. She is trying to get up. She should not move. Someone help her. But no one touched her. Not because they did not want to. Because they sensed something important was happening. Something she needed to do herself. Her fingers curled tighter against the floor. Her shoulders shook as she pushed harder. Her knees slid slightly, but she caught herself. She exhaled through her teeth, forcing the air out slowly until she regained control. Finally, she rose. First to her knees, then to her feet. She wobbled. She steadied herself. She placed one hand on a nearby table for balance. The other remained on her belly, protective and fierce. Her chest heaved with the effort. Her legs felt like they could buckle again at any second. But she stayed upright. The entire restaurant fell silent. Guests who had been whispering moments earlier stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered. Chairs creaked softly as people leaned in. The piano player stood motionless beside his instrument. Everyone watched her. Anna lifted her head. Her eyes were still glassy from tears, but the fear that had filled them moments earlier had vanished. In its place was something clear and strong. Resolve. The kind of resolve a person finds only when they have reached the point where there is nothing left to lose. Her gaze locked on Ethan. He stiffened. Then she looked at Clara. Clara's smile faltered. Anna inhaled deeply, her chest rising with new strength, and she spoke. Her voice was louder than before. Steady, clear, sharp enough to cut through the silence. You will not humiliate me again. The words carried across the room, echoing off the glass walls, vibrating through the giant chandelier above them. A ripple moved through the crowd, not of shock, but of admiration. Someone in the back murmured, "Good for her." Another whispered, "Finally, she is standing up for herself." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. He opened his mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted quickly to the phones still pointed at him. For the first time all afternoon, doubt flickered across his expression. Anna took a small, steady step forward. Her legs still trembled, but her voice did not. "I have had enough. From both of you." "No." Her words struck like a slap. Clara scoffed under her breath, trying to maintain control. "Anna, you are being dramatic. You fell, that is all." Anna kept her gaze locked on her. "You pushed me." Clara's lips parted. She froze. Her face twitched in a subtle panic she could not fully hide. She glanced toward Ethan for reassurance, but Ethan did not move. His mask cracked slightly as he realized the witnesses in the room had already drawn their own conclusions. Anna continued, her voice gaining strength. "You burned me, you lied, and you helped humiliate me in front of every person here." The older woman beside her nodded, proud. Ethan stepped forward finally, trying to retake control. "Anna, enough. You are making things worse." Anna turned toward him, her expression unshaken. "No, you made things worse. When you defended her instead of your own wife. When you pulled me like I was nothing. When you threatened to take everything away from me." "Mo." A soft murmur rose from the guests. "She is right. He grabbed her. She deserves better." Ethan swallowed. His face reddened with embarrassment. "You misunderstood. I never meant to hurt you." "You did hurt me," Anna said quietly. "You hurt me more than you know." Her voice did not tremble now. It rang with truth, pain, strength. Anna straightened her back. Her shoulders pulled into a firm line. She stood fully upright for the first time since the attack. She no longer looked like a woman broken by humiliation. She looked like someone reclaiming herself, someone who would not accept cruelty any longer. Clara crossed her arms, trying to regain dominance. "Anna, sit down. You are making a scene." Anna shook her head slowly. "You made the scene. I am ending it." The room fell into complete, breathless silence. Not one chair moved. Not one phone lowered. Not one person spoke. They were witnessing a transformation. A woman rising from the floor she had been shoved onto. A wife standing up against betrayal. A mother protecting her child. A human being reclaiming her dignity. And for the first time since the ordeal began, Ethan and Clara both looked genuinely afraid. Not because of what Anna had said, but because she finally found her voice, and she was not about to lose it again. For several long seconds, the restaurant remained frozen in the wake of Anna's declaration. The marble floor gleamed beneath the chandelier. Every face in the room turned toward her, stunned by the strength she had found. She stood trembling but unbroken, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, her breathing steady at last. The fear that once clouded her eyes had disappeared. What remained was clarity, strength, fire. Ethan's face twitched, unable to hide his shock. Clara shifted uneasily beside him, her arms still folded, but her confidence beginning to crack. The murmurs among the guests grew louder. Disapproval, anger, sympathy, outrage. The emotional tide had shifted, and both of them could feel it. Then a chair scraped across the floor. A slow, deliberate sound. Not rushed, not panicked. Commanding. Every head turned toward the VIP section of the restaurant. A solitary woman rose from her table. She was older, perhaps in her late 60s, with silver hair styled into a neat twist. Her posture was tall and regal, her shoulders squared with natural authority. The navy suit she wore fit her perfectly, elegant without being flashy. Her presence radiated power in a way that made the air seem to vibrate. Her name was whispered across the room almost instantly. "Is that her? Wait, that looks like... Oh my God, that is really her." "No." The older woman stepped away from her table with a calm, measured stride. When she reached the center of the room, she paused. Her gaze settled on Ethan first, slicing through him like a blade. Then she turned her attention to Anna, and something soft flickered in her eyes. Something protective, something fierce. She lifted her chin and spoke with a voice that carried effortlessly through the entire restaurant. It was not loud, but it was strong, firm, and unwavering. "My name," she said clearly, "is Margaret Hale." The room fell into silence again. Not the confused silence from earlier. This was the kind of silence that comes when power enters the space. Authority, history, influence. Margaret continued, her words crisp and sharp. "I am the Women's Council Chair." A stunned gasp rippled through the guests. Even the servers stopped moving. The restaurant manager froze near the bar. Ethan stiffened. Clara's breath hitched audibly. The Women's Council was one of the most powerful national advocacy organizations in the country. They worked with federal courts, state legislators, police departments, and major corporations. Their investigations had taken down CEOs, judges, senators, and business moguls. To many people, they were the last line of defense for women facing abuse and injustice. And their chairwoman was standing right here, in this room, watching everything unfold. Margaret shifted her weight slightly, grounding herself like someone who had delivered many difficult truths before. She looked directly at Ethan as she spoke. I witnessed the entire incident, every second, every word, every act of cruelty that took place in this room. Ethan swallowed hard. His throat clicked audibly. Ma'am, with all due respect, you must have misunderstood. My wife is emotional. Margaret raised one hand, palm outward, stopping him instantly. The motion was calm but absolute. It carried more authority than a shouted command. No, I did not misunderstand anything, she said. I saw your mistress assault your pregnant wife. I saw you defend the attacker. I saw you grab your wife hard enough to nearly injure her and your unborn child. And I saw you threaten her livelihood as a means of control. Every word struck like a hammer against stone. Clara stepped forward, panic rising. She slipped. Margaret turned her gaze to Clara, and Clara's voice died in her throat. It was as if someone had physically pressed a hand against her mouth. Clara retreated behind Ethan again, rattled by the older woman's unbreakable composure. Margaret's eyes narrowed. I also saw you push her, intentionally. Clara's cheeks flushed. Her arms dropped from their confident fold. She took a small step backward, like a child caught stealing. Margaret returned her attention to the staff. Lock the doors. A collective gasp moved through the room. The restaurant manager blinked nervously. Ma'am, that is not procedure. We cannot. You can. And you will, Margaret replied. A crime was committed here. No one leaves until the proper authorities arrive. Her voice had the kind of commanding certainty that no one dared challenge. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, but the decision was made. The manager nodded quickly and signaled to two employees. They hurried to the double doors at the front, turned the brass locks, and closed the curtains over the windows. Ethan's voice rose with fury. You cannot do this. You cannot trap us here. Margaret faced him fully. I am not trapping anyone. I am preserving evidence. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She lifted it in the air, turning the screen toward the guests. The soft glow illuminated her face. I recorded everything, she announced. From the moment the coffee was thrown to the moment your wife stood up with courage none of you possessed. A tremor ran through the room. Guests leaned forward. Some gasped. Some whispered prayers of relief. Others murmured with praise. The older woman beside Anna squeezed her arm gently. Anna's breath caught. Her heartbeat quickened. Her eyes darted to Margaret, uncertain and overwhelmed. Margaret held her gaze. You are not alone, she said softly. You were never alone. Mun? Then she turned back to Ethan. I will not let this be hidden behind money, lies, or influence. Not today. Not ever. Ethan paled, his jaw clenched. He looked at the phone still pointed at him, the whispers, the outrage, the woman standing between him and the truth. And for the first time since the nightmare began, the power in the room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. The moment Margaret Hale declared her title, the energy in the room shifted completely. It was as if the entire building exhaled. Power had changed hands, control had shifted, and Ethan Prescott, the man who once commanded boardrooms and investors with nothing but his voice, suddenly looked very small. His face drained of color, his eyes widened. His posture, once stiff with rage, sagged as though someone had cut invisible strings inside him. He took a step back, instinctive and frightened. It was the first time anyone had ever seen him retreat from anything. He stammered, You cannot be serious. But Margaret did not even blink. Her presence alone silenced him more effectively than any raised voice could have. She stood unmoving, her phone still lifted slightly, the recording glowing against her palm. The weight of her reputation pressed down on the room like a storm front. Clara reacted very differently. A strangled sound burst from her throat. Panic contorted her face. Her hands curled into frantic claws as she pushed her way forward with desperation that shattered every ounce of poise she had faked earlier. Delete it, Clara cried. Delete the video. You cannot show that. You cannot. I am telling you to delete it right now. Several guests gasped at her outburst. It was no longer the polished mistress in a red dress. It was a cornered animal, terrified of exposure. Her voice shook with hysteria, rising in pitch until it cracked. You cannot record us. You cannot do this. You have no authority here. But before she could lunge toward Margaret, Two hotel security guards stepped between them. Both men were tall and broad, dressed in black suits with discreet earpieces. They placed their hands out, blocking Clara's path with calm firmness. "Ma'am, please step back," one said. Clara slapped at his hand, her voice turning shrill. "Move. I said move. She has no right." The guard's tone hardened. "Do not touch me again." Clara recoiled, shaking with fury and fear. Her lipstick was smudged from shouting. Her eyes glistened with tears she had not expected to shed today. Her entire composure had shattered. She screamed again, pointing at Margaret. "You cannot use that. This is illegal." Margaret did not raise her voice. She did not even flinch. "Everything that happened in this room is evidence, and I have every right to protect a pregnant woman who was assaulted." Clara screamed louder, her voice cracking. "Ethan, say something. Tell them they cannot do this." Ethan did not move. He simply stood there, frozen, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. For the first time, he seemed aware of every camera pointed at him, every witness, every whisper, every accusation forming in the air. A businessman near the bar said loudly, "I saw everything. If she tries to lie, I will testify." A woman holding her phone added, "So will I." Another guest stepped forward. "I recorded it too." "No." Anna, still standing with one hand on her stomach, watched the scene with wide eyes. Her breath came slow and cautious, but she stayed upright. She was no longer the trembling woman on the floor. She was the woman the room had chosen to protect. The tide had fully turned. One man in a gray suit pulled a badge wallet from his pocket. "I am an attorney," he said, stepping into the center of the room. "I am obligated to report a crime when I witness one." He dialed a number on his phone. "Yes, I need police and paramedics at the Westmont Hotel dining hall immediately. We have a pregnant assault victim, multiple eyewitnesses, and recorded evidence." Clara's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair to keep herself from collapsing. "This cannot be happening," she whispered, her voice frayed. But it was happening, and everyone in the room knew it. Ethan's voice finally returned, but it came out weak, cracked, and desperate. "Anna, you do not have to involve police. We can solve this privately. Think about the baby. Think about your image." Anna lifted her chin. Her voice came out steady. "You only care about your own image." Ethan tried again. "Please. This will ruin me." Margaret stepped forward. "You destroyed yourself. Your wife only survived it." Ethan looked around the room, hoping someone would defend him. No one did. Not one guest. Not one server. Not one member of his so-called elite circle. Another security guard approached. This one wore the hotel manager's badge. His voice was firm. "Sir, I need you to come with us to wait near the lobby." Ethan's face tightened. "You are escorting me out of my own event?" "It is no longer your event," the guard replied calmly, "and the police will need a statement." There was no escape from the humiliation. The entire restaurant had watched him pull his pregnant wife by the arm. They had seen him defend the mistress. They had heard him threaten to freeze Anna's accounts. They had filmed Clara pushing Anna to the floor. All of it had been recorded. Ethan stumbled back another step, his shoulders sagging in defeat. His arrogance, his wealth, his influence meant nothing in this moment. For once in his life, he was not in control. He was exposed. Completely. The guards flanked him. "Sir, please step toward the exit." Ethan looked at Anna, but Anna did not look away. She met his eyes with quiet strength. She did not speak. She did not need to. He lowered his gaze. For the first time that afternoon, he looked ashamed. The guards guided him toward the doors. Clara ran after him, grabbing at his sleeve. "Ethan, Ethan, do something. Do not let them take you. Make them delete the video." Ethan shook her off in frustration. "Be quiet. You made everything worse." Clara froze, stunned, abandoned even by the man she believed she controlled. And as Ethan was escorted out of the restaurant, the guests stepped aside. Not in respect, but in disgust. His reign of cruelty had ended, and justice was finally on its way. The paramedics arrived within minutes, weaving through the crowd of stunned guests and stepping carefully around the shattered cup on the marble floor. Their uniforms stood out sharply against the elegant backdrop of linen tablecloths and gold trim. One of them knelt beside Anna with a calm but urgent expression. Another gently guided her toward a stretcher, placing supportive hands along her back and arms as if she were made of something fragile and precious. "You are safe now," the paramedic murmured. "We are going to take care of you." Anna nodded, though her legs still trembled beneath her. She eased herself onto the stretcher with assistance from the older woman who had stayed at her side through everything. The cold cloth she had pressed to her burn was replaced with a fresh cooling pad. They secured her safely, checked her pulse, and monitored her breathing. Margaret Hale walked beside the stretcher as the paramedics led Anna out of the dining hall. People stepped aside with respect, their faces filled with sympathy and silent promises of support. Phones that had once recorded her humiliation now lowered in recognition of her strength. A few guests whispered softly, "I hope she is all right. She deserves justice. She was so brave." Ethan was nowhere in sight. Clara had disappeared into a hallway, escorted by security. And the restaurant that once buzzed with luxury now hummed with the gravity of what had transpired. When Anna reached the private medical room in the hotel, the paramedics worked efficiently. They placed monitoring pads on her abdomen, checked her vitals, and watched the screen intently. Anna lay still, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of her stomach, silently praying that her baby felt none of the chaos she had endured. A soft, rhythmic sound filled the room. A steady heartbeat. Strong, clear, steady. Anna's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes. Relief washed through her like warm sunlight after a storm. She covered her mouth with her hand and let out a trembling exhale. "Your baby is all right," the medic said gently. "The heartbeat is strong." Anna closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She had feared so much. She had endured so much. But her baby was safe. That single truth felt like a small miracle. Margaret stepped closer, her expression softening. She reached for Anna's hand and held it with a gentle but firm grip. Her presence filled the room with safety that could not be faked. "You do not have to fight alone anymore," Margaret said quietly. "Not after today. Not ever again." Anna looked up at her, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. She wanted to speak, but her voice cracked from emotion. She finally managed a whisper. "Thank you." Margaret shook her head. "Do not thank me. Thank yourself for standing up. You did something incredibly brave." Anna let the words settle in her heart. Brave. She had never thought of herself that way. She had always been the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict, the one who tried to preserve peace even when it ate away at her. But today she had stood. Today she had fought back. Today she had refused to let anyone silence her. Outside the room, noise began to swell. Not chaotic shouting, but the energetic hum of voices from the hallway. Reporters had already begun to gather. The hotel staff tried to keep them at a distance, but the story had moved faster than anyone could contain. Within hours, news stations across the city ran breaking headlines. Pregnant woman assaulted at luxury hotel brunch. CEO under investigation for domestic abuse. Women's Council chair intervenes in shocking public incident. Clips from guests' live streams spread across social media. The video Margaret recorded began circulating under hashtags demanding accountability. Ethan's reputation, once polished to a mirror shine, cracked instantly. Investors made statements. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Advocates across the country echoed Margaret's condemnation. For the first time in a long time, the truth was louder than the lies. Inside the private room, Anna sat propped up against the pillows, her hands still resting on her stomach. The medics finished their checks and assured her she would be monitored until the ambulance arrived to take her to the hospital for a full evaluation. The older woman who helped her earlier peeked in, smiling with relief when she saw Anna awake and stable. "You are going to be all right," the woman said with warmth. "You are stronger than you know." Margaret nodded. "And you will have help. Legal help. Emotional help. Community support. Whatever you need." Anna felt something inside her loosen, a knot that had been tied tight for too long finally easing. She had been afraid of losing everything, her home, her safety, her dignity. But in that moment, she realized she had something far greater than money or status. She had people who believed her, people who stood with her, people who saw her strength. Later that afternoon, the ambulance transported her to the hospital. A nurse checked on her regularly. The heartbeat monitor stayed steady. She sipped warm water. She watched soft sunlight move across the white walls like a gentle reminder that new beginnings were possible. Evening came slowly. Golden light spilled into the hospital room, painting everything in warm shades of amber. Anna stood near the window, her hand resting lightly on her belly as she gazed outside. Cars moved below. People walked along the sidewalks. The world continued, but something inside her had changed. She felt lighter, not because the pain had vanished, but because she was no longer carrying it alone. She inhaled deeply. The air smelled clean. The light felt warm. For the first time in months, her shoulders relaxed. This was not the end of her story. This was the beginning. A beginning shaped by truth instead of fear, by strength instead of silence, by freedom instead of control. Her reflection in the window looked back at her softly. Her face still showed signs of pain, but her eyes glowed with something new. Hope. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to her baby, "We are safe, and we are free." The sunlight rested gently on her skin, illuminating her in a warm, golden glow. It felt like the first day of her new life, and she was finally ready for it.
My friend, let me ask you, what would you do if the person you trusted most, the father of your child, kicked you in front of everyone you knew? Have you ever felt that kind of betrayal, where the pain cuts so deep it almost steals your breath? Tonight, I want you to walk with me through a story that will break your heart and heal it. Trust me, you'll want to hear every word. Please like, share, and subscribe. The ballroom was alive with laughter, music, and the faint clinking of champagne glasses. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. To the outside world, it was just another night of indulgence for the city's elite. But hidden beneath the glamour, something darker was about to unfold. Sophia Carter walked in slowly, one hand resting protectively on her 6-month pregnant belly. Her dress was modest compared to the shimmering gowns around her, a soft cream color that clung gently to her growing figure. She was nervous, but her heart carried a small hope. Her husband, Damien Carter, had promised that tonight would be different, that he would introduce her proudly, that he would show the world that she was still his wife and the mother of his child. She had believed him because she wanted to believe. For months, whispers of his affair had circulated. Rumors of late-night meetings, photos of him with a younger woman, and the gut-wrenching moments when he would come home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She had chosen silence, convincing herself that once he saw her tonight, once he saw the life they had created together, he would change. But as she stepped into the glittering crowd, her hope began to crumble. Damien stood near the center of the ballroom, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a tuxedo cut sharp enough to slice through steel. His confidence filled the room. And draped over his arm was Elena Ross, the mistress everyone whispered about. Elena was stunning in a crimson dress that hugged her curves, her laughter high and throaty as she whispered in Damien's ear. He smiled down at her, not noticing the pregnant wife slowly walking closer, clutching her small purse like a shield. Sophia's heart pounded. She told herself to stay calm, to simply approach, to smile, to remind Damien of who she was. She had been his partner for 8 years, the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing, who had believed in him before the money, the success, the luxury. She wanted the world to see her place beside him, not the mistress flaunting on his arm. When Damien finally noticed her, the room seemed to hush. His eyes widened briefly, then narrowed with irritation. He wasn't happy to see her. No, he was embarrassed. Embarrassed that his pregnant wife had dared to show up uninvited, that she might ruin the image he was trying to project to his investors and friends. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath as she reached him. Her lips trembled. "Damien, I just wanted to be here. I thought." But she didn't get to finish. Elena let out a mocking laugh, her eyes glittering with cruelty. "Oh, Damien, you didn't tell me she was coming. How quaint. She looks like she came from the clearance rack." The group of men around them chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh at the mistress's cruelty or pretend they hadn't heard. Sophia's face burned. She felt the sting of tears forming, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Damien's jaw tightened. He wanted her gone, and he didn't care how. "You should leave, Sophia. You're embarrassing me." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Please, Damien, don't do this. I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." For a moment, a flicker of humanity crossed his face. But then Elena whispered something in his ear, and his expression hardened into stone. The next moment would sear itself into Sophia's memory forever. In front of his friends, his investors, his mistress, and dozens of flashing cameras, Damien shoved Sophia's hand away and kicked her, hard, sending her stumbling backward. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Her cry pierced the music as she clutched her stomach, trying to protect the baby inside. She fell against a chair, the pain shooting through her body like fire. The crowd froze. Some covered their mouths. Others turned away in shame, pretending not to have seen. Elena smirked, satisfied, as if the kick had been aimed at her rival's dignity as much as her body. Damien straightened his tuxedo, his expression cold, and muttered, "Pathetic." Sophia's hands shook as she tried to push herself upright. Every eye in the room was on her, but no one moved to help. The people she once considered friends avoided her gaze, terrified of crossing the powerful man standing above her. She had never felt so alone. Her heart raced with fear for the baby. She pressed her palm against her belly, whispering, "Stay with me, please." And in that moment, a fire began to burn inside her chest. The humiliation cut deep, but the rage went deeper. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. As Damien turned his back to her and laughed with Elena as though nothing had happened, Sophia made a silent vow. She would endure the pain. She would survive this night. And when the time was right, she would rise again. Not as the broken wife Damien thought he had destroyed, but as a woman ready to bring him and his mistress to their knees. And none of them, not Damien, not Elena, not the so-called friends who stood frozen tonight, had any idea of the storm that was about to come. Sophia Carter hadn't always lived in glittering ballrooms or walked beneath chandeliers that cost more than her childhood home. Long before her name became attached to Damien Carter, she had been just Sophia Reyes, a girl from a modest neighborhood in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner. Life was never easy, but it taught Sophia resilience. She grew up understanding the value of sacrifice, watching her mother give up everything so her daughter could have a better chance. Her childhood was painted with simple joys: reading borrowed books under the dim light of a street lamp, playing with neighborhood kids on cracked sidewalks, and dreaming of something more. She never believed she'd live in a mansion or be photographed at charity galas. Her dreams were smaller but heartfelt: to finish school, to have a family, to be loved. When she earned a scholarship to a state university, it felt like a miracle. Sophia studied hard, juggling part-time jobs as a barista and a library assistant to pay for what her scholarship didn't cover. She majored in business administration, not because she was passionate about numbers, but because she believed it could open doors to stability. She wanted to break the cycle of struggle for herself and for the family she hoped to have one day. It was during her junior year that she met Damien. He wasn't the billionaire tycoon he would later become. Back then, he was a smooth-talking salesman with dreams bigger than his bank account. He worked at a car dealership near campus, and Sophia had walked in one rainy afternoon, desperate for a reliable used car to drive to work and classes. Damien had spotted her immediately. His charm was magnetic: broad smile, confident voice, the kind of man who could make you feel like the center of the universe with just a glance. He sold her the car, but more than that, he sold her the dream of being loved. He showered her with attention, bringing her coffee during late-night study sessions, surprising her with flowers he said he'd borrowed from display tables at work. For Sophia, who had never known steady affection, it felt like magic. Within a year, they were inseparable. Damien proposed in the most dramatic way he could afford, in the middle of a crowded park with a cheap silver ring and a promise that one day I'll give you the world. Sophia said yes, not because of the ring, but because of the sincerity she thought she saw in his eyes. They married young, with barely enough money to pay the rent on a one-bedroom apartment. But Sophia didn't care. She believed in him. She believed in them. She worked tirelessly, holding down a steady job at a small bookstore while supporting Damien's ever-changing career pursuits. He jumped from sales to real estate to small investments, and she stood by him, cooking late dinners, encouraging him when deals fell through, and reminding him that success took time. When Damien finally landed a breakthrough in real estate, Sophia was there, carrying boxes into their first real office, answering phones, and filing contracts without pay. She was his unpaid secretary, his quiet partner, and his most loyal cheerleader. Every win he celebrated, she celebrated too. Every late-night meeting, she stayed awake for his return. When his company began to thrive, he credited himself for the genius moves. But Sophia knew the truth. She had carried him through the early years, sacrificing her own ambitions to fuel his. And then came the baby. When Sophia found out she was pregnant, she had cried tears of joy. To her, it was the final piece of the life she'd always wanted, a family. Damien had seemed happy at first, kissing her belly, telling her they would raise a child in luxury, far from the hardships she had endured as a girl. She thought it was proof that all her sacrifices had been worth it. But slowly, things changed. Damien grew colder. The more successful he became, the more distant he was. Business trips stretched into nights out. Lavish dinners were spent with colleagues she never met. And whispers of Elena, the mistress, began to creep into Sophia's life. At first, she refused to believe them. She told herself she was paranoid, that her husband was just busy. But deep down, she knew. She could see it in the way he stopped looking at her, in the way his laughter was louder with others than with her. Still, she held on. She believed love meant endurance, that marriage meant forgiveness. She endured the loneliness of a large, empty mansion. She endured the snide remarks about her boring maternity dresses. She endured the humiliation of being excluded from public appearances. For Sophia, the only thing that mattered was the tiny heartbeat inside her, the child who kicked gently when she cried, as if reminding her that she wasn't alone. But love built on sacrifice can only hold so much weight. Every cruel word, every late night, every trace of perfume that wasn't hers chipped away at the woman who had once believed in fairy tales. And yet, even as her marriage crumbled, Sophia clung to one truth. She was stronger than he realized. Damien might see her as fragile, as someone to discard, but she knew the fire inside her had not died. She had survived poverty. She had survived heartbreak. She had survived humiliation. She would survive this too. Her only mistake was believing that endurance was enough. But endurance had its limits, and the night Damien kicked her in front of his friends and his mistress, that limit was shattered. Because deep inside, Sophia's story was not just one of betrayal. It was the story of a woman who would rise again, not as the timid wife who once stood in Damien's shadow, but as a force that would destroy both him and the mistress who mocked her. And the first crack in Damien's perfect empire was about to appear sooner than anyone expected. The Carter Foundation Charity Gala was supposed to be the highlight of the season. Every year, the city's most powerful families gathered under one gilded roof to sip champagne, pledge donations, and measure each other's worth by the sparkle of their jewels and the weight of their last investment. For Damien Carter, it was more than just a gala. It was his stage, his chance to parade himself as a king among lesser men. The Metropolitan Hotel ballroom glistened like a palace carved out of light. Marble floors reflected the glow of massive chandeliers, while gold-trimmed drapes cascaded from 20-foot ceilings. Tables draped in silk overflowed with roses imported from Italy, and crystal glasses filled with vintage wine. A string quartet played softly in the corner, but their music was drowned out by the chatter of billion-dollar deals and the self-satisfied laughter of men who believed they owned the world. On this night, every detail mattered. Journalists from society magazines lingered near the entrance, their cameras flashing with every notable arrival. Young women in sequined gowns whispered behind jeweled clutches, trading gossip about who was secretly bankrupt, who had married for power, and who was cheating with whom. Men in tuxedos circled like wolves, their smiles sharp, their handshakes colder than ice. And at the center of it all, Damien thrived. He moved through the crowd like a conductor directing a symphony of admiration. He had cultivated this image for years, the self-made success, the billionaire who could charm senators and CEOs with a single smirk. Tonight, he wore it proudly, his hand resting on Elena's back, as though she were a prize he had won. Elena, of course, basked in the attention. Her red dress shimmered under the chandeliers, and every flick of her hair was calculated for maximum effect. She laughed too loudly, leaned too close, and flaunted Damien as though she were daring anyone to challenge her place at his side. For the first time, she was not the hidden mistress. Tonight, she was the woman Damien wanted the world to see. What neither of them expected was the quiet storm walking through the entrance in a cream maternity gown. Sophia's arrival was not accompanied by flashing cameras or whispered admiration. She wasn't draped in diamonds, and her dress wasn't made by some famous designer. But she carried something Elena did not: dignity. Even with fear twisting inside her, she held her head high as she walked past the curious stares. Her presence was a reminder that Damien Carter was still married, that he had a wife, and that wife carried his child. The ballroom reacted as though an invisible glass had shattered. Conversations faltered. The musicians stumbled on their notes. Eyes shifted quickly from Damien to Sophia, then to Elena. The tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Damien's friends, men who had shared whiskey with him in private clubs and laughed at his cruel jokes, watched carefully. Their expressions betrayed what they truly thought: that Sophia didn't belong here. To them, she was a disruption to the spectacle. Their loyalty was not to her, but to Damien's power. Sophia felt every stare like a dagger. She wanted to turn and leave to escape the suffocating silence, but she kept walking, her heels tapping against the marble floor with quiet determination. Her hand never left her belly. Her baby was with her, and that gave her strength. She reached Damien just as the cameras shifted, clicking furiously to capture the scandalous tableau: a wealthy man, his glamorous mistress, and the pregnant wife who dared to show up uninvited. "Darling," Sophia said softly, her voice trembling but clear, "I wanted to stand with you tonight." The words should have softened him. They should have reminded him of who she was, of everything she had given. But Damien's face hardened like granite. He leaned close, his voice sharp enough to pierce her heart. "You don't belong here, Sophia. Go home before you embarrass yourself further." Her lips parted in shock. She wanted to plead, to remind him of the baby. But before she could, Elena leaned in with a wicked smile. "Oh, let her stay," Elena purred, her voice loud enough for their circle to hear. "It will be fun for everyone to see the difference between us." The men around them chuckled nervously. Some lifted their glasses as though toasting Damien's audacity. Others looked away, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. Sophia's face burned, but she stood her ground. The orchestra struck up a new tune, a dramatic waltz that seemed to mock her trembling heart. Damien's investors and associates gathered closer, hungry for entertainment, pretending to be engrossed in conversation while their eyes devoured the unfolding scandal. Sophia felt her baby kick inside her. It was a tiny push, but it reminded her she wasn't alone. She straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to meet Damien's eyes. "I am your wife," she whispered fiercely, "and I deserve to stand beside you." That was when Damien snapped. His mask of charm cracked, revealing the cruelty underneath. In one swift motion, he shoved her hand aside and delivered the brutal kick that sent her stumbling. Gasps tore through the ballroom. Cameras flashed. The music stopped. Sophia collapsed against a chair, clutching her stomach, her cry echoing through the hall like a broken note. For a moment silence reigned, and then the whispers began. Some horrified, some gleeful, all poisonous. Did he just... in front of everyone? My God, she's pregnant. But Damien didn't flinch. He adjusted his tuxedo, smirked at Elena, and said coldly, "Some people don't know their place." The cruelty of it all seared into Sophia's soul. She looked around desperately for help, but no one moved. Not one so-called friend, not one of Damien's powerful allies stepped forward. And in that moment of betrayal, not just by her husband but by everyone who watched, something inside her broke. And something else was born. Because humiliation in front of the world can destroy a woman, or it can create a storm no man is prepared to face. Damien Carter had always loved control. From the time he was a struggling salesman, he discovered that charm could be a weapon sharper than any blade. He had learned how to smile at the right people, flatter the right egos, and twist words into gold. To outsiders, he was the story of the American dream. A man who built an empire from nothing. But behind the polished mask was a hunger that could never be satisfied. He had grown addicted to the feeling of being admired. Every deal closed, every article praising him, every photograph that placed him among the city's elite, these were his fuel. And when that hunger mixed with pride, it created a monster. To Damien, Sophia was no longer the woman who once lifted him up. She was a reminder of the years he wanted to forget. The years of scraping by, of counting pennies, of driving a second-hand car. By the time he had wealth, he saw her not as a partner, but as a weight. She was quiet, simple, dressed modestly, unwilling to change herself to match the glittering new world he had built. She wasn't glamorous. She didn't sparkle under the chandeliers the way Elena did. And worst of all, she carried a child, something that reminded him of responsibility when all he wanted was freedom. Damien told himself he deserved more. More excitement, more attention, more beauty. That was when Elena Ross entered his life like a flame. Elena had been a junior marketing associate at one of Damien's partner firms. 26 years old, bold and unapologetically ambitious, she had the kind of beauty that demanded a second look. Her hair was jet black, her lips always painted in daring red, and her laugh carried across any room. She was not content to be unnoticed. She wanted power, and she was willing to use her allure to get it. The first time Damien saw her, she leaned against a marble bar at a private event, sipping champagne as if she owned the place. She caught his eye and didn't look away. That was all it took. Their affair began in secret, stolen moments in hotel rooms, whispered phone calls after midnight, gifts bought with company funds disguised as business expenses. Elena fed Damien's ego like no one else. She called him brilliant, untouchable, a man destined to rule the city. She made him believe he was a god. And unlike Sophia, Elena never asked him to slow down, never spoke of responsibility or sacrifice. She was fire and danger, and Damien craved it. Soon, she wasn't just a mistress, she was his addiction. What Elena wanted, however, went beyond affection. She didn't just want Damien's attention, she wanted his world. She wanted the mansion, the luxury cars, the invitations to galas, the headline photos. She was tired of being someone's secret, she wanted to be seen. Sophia was the obstacle. To Elena, Sophia was laughable. A small-town wife, who didn't know how to dress, who clung to her belly as though pregnancy were a badge of honor, instead of, in Elena's eyes, a weakness. Elena mocked her behind closed doors, imitating her simple manner of speaking, ridiculing the way she dressed in department store dresses, while others wore couture. Elena had convinced Damien that Sophia was a burden holding him back from the life he truly deserved. And Damien, blinded by arrogance, believed her. The idea of discarding his wife felt less like betrayal and more like progress. But the true cruelty wasn't just their affair, it was how they flaunted it. Damien began taking Elena to business events, introducing her to investors, whispering in her ear while cameras flashed. He wanted the world to see him as bold enough to replace his wife before even divorcing her. Elena encouraged it, loving the shock, loving the whispers, loving how society began to shift their gazes from Sophia to her. The night of the gala, the cruelty reached its peak. Damien wanted to prove something, that he was untouchable, that even his pregnant wife could be humiliated without consequence. And Elena wanted to bask in that moment, to watch Sophia crumble in public. When Damien kicked Sophia, Elena's smirk told the truth. She enjoyed it. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp like the others. Instead, she smiled as if she had finally won. For her, it wasn't just about stealing Damien, it was about erasing Sophia entirely. But arrogance is dangerous. Neither Damien nor Elena noticed the cameras flashing, the reporters scribbling notes, the shocked expressions of guests who would whisper about that night for months. They believed their power protected them, that no scandal could touch them. What they didn't know was that power can shift in an instant. And when it shifts, it doesn't just fall, it crashes. Sophia's tears that night weren't the tears of defeat. They were the quiet storm building behind her eyes. While Damien and Elena laughed in their arrogance, Sophia was already changing. The humiliation had cracked something inside her, and through that crack, strength was pouring in. Damien thought he had broken her. Elena thought she had erased her. But both of them had made the same fatal mistake. They underestimated the woman they believed was powerless. And by the time they realized what Sophia was truly capable of, it would already be too late. The sound of Sophia's cry after Damien's kick still lingered in the ballroom long after the music stopped. For a moment, the glamorous crowd stood paralyzed, unsure whether to look at her, at Damien, or at the floor. The silence was louder than any symphony, heavy with judgment and cowardice. Sophia lay against the edge of a chair, her arms wrapped around her stomach, trying desperately to shield the baby within. Her breath came in shallow gasps, Pain radiated through her, not just from the cruel kick, but from the realization of what had just happened. The man she once trusted with her life had humiliated her in front of the entire world. But if she expected help, she didn't find it. The women whispered behind jeweled hands, their eyes wide with pity or curiosity. The men shifted uncomfortably, sipping champagne to mask their guilt for doing nothing. These were people who smiled at her at dinners, who once praised her for her kindness, who claimed to be her friends. Yet not one of them moved to lift her up. Reporters stationed at the entrance had rushed forward, cameras clicking with merciless speed. The flashes lit the room like lightning. Their lenses didn't miss a thing. The mistress smirking in red, the billionaire standing tall, and the pregnant wife on the floor, clutching her belly. Within hours, the photos would spread across social media, plastered on gossip sites, dissected on news channels. Sophia forced herself to stand. Her knees trembled, her face pale, but she would not give Damien the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. With one hand on the chair for support and the other on her stomach, she rose slowly. Her eyes swept across the sea of faces, searching for a trace of humanity. None came. "Are you all right, Mrs. Carter?" a timid voice finally asked. It belonged not to a guest, but to a young waiter standing near the edge of the crowd. He had dropped his tray in shock at the scene. His question was a whisper compared to the silence, but it carried weight. Sophia gave the faintest nod, swallowing back tears. She wanted to scream, to rage at the crowd for their silence, but her dignity forced her lips closed. Damien, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip of wine, and turned his attention back to his associates. His tone was calm, arrogant. "Now where were we?" The cruelty was unbearable. Elena clung to his arm, her laughter bubbling up again, as though Sophia's pain were entertainment. To them, she was nothing more than an obstacle that had been removed. Sophia felt her chest tighten with humiliation. The whispers around her grew louder. "She looks so weak. Can you believe he did that?" She should have stayed home. What did she expect? Her vision blurred, not just from tears, but from the weight of shame pressing down on her. She had been reduced to nothing in their eyes, a foolish wife who dared to step into a world where she no longer belonged. But humiliation has a strange way of birthing clarity. In that moment, Sophia understood something important. The people in that room would never defend her. They had chosen their side, and it was Damien's. To them, she was expendable. To Damien, she was disposable. She drew in a shaky breath, straightened her back as best she could, and began walking toward the exit. Every step was agony, but every step also felt like a declaration. She would not let them see her fall. The cameras followed her. Flash after flash captured her swollen belly, her tear-streaked face, her trembling hands. By the time she pushed open the ballroom doors, her humiliation was immortalized. The city would wake up to her disgrace. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap. She leaned against a pillar, trying to steady herself. Her chest heaved, her stomach clenched, and fear for her baby nearly crushed her. She whispered again, "Stay with me, please," as if her child could hear and understand. She wanted to call a taxi, to disappear into the night, but the paparazzi swarmed like vultures. Questions were shouted, cameras shoved in her face. "Did Damien hit you, Mrs. Carter? Is the baby safe? Are you planning to divorce him?" Sophia covered her face, pushing past the frenzy. The flashes were blinding, the voices deafening. She wanted nothing more than to vanish, to crawl into a place where no one could see her brokenness. By the time she reached the curb, tears had already streaked her makeup. She climbed into a waiting cab, her voice barely audible as she gave the address of her home. The driver didn't ask questions. He had seen enough scandals in this city to recognize one when it unfolded. As the car pulled away, Sophia stared out the window at the glittering skyline. The city sparkled, but all she saw was betrayal. Her heart ached, her body trembled, but deep inside, something was shifting. That night, the internet exploded. Videos surfaced within hours, showing Damien's kick from every angle. Hashtags trended worldwide. Justice for Sophia, Damien the monster, pregnant and abused. Public opinion turned fast. But in the world of the wealthy, scandal could be buried with money. Damien believed it would blow over, that his lawyers and publicists would silence the noise, that his empire was untouchable. He laughed in Elena's ear as he scrolled through headlines. dismissing them as jealous nobodies with too much time online. What he didn't know was that Sophia had reached her breaking point. She had spent years enduring, forgiving, sacrificing. That night ended all of it. The humiliation didn't destroy her. It freed her. Because Sophia was no longer the timid wife who waited at home. She was a mother fighting for her child. She was a woman betrayed, broken, and ready to rise. And Damien was about to learn that the woman he kicked in front of his friends was the same woman who would bring his empire to its knees. The cab ride home was quiet, but inside Sophia's chest a storm raged. The hum of the city outside, the neon lights flickering across the windows, the driver's silence, none of it mattered. Her world had ended on that ballroom floor. When the cab pulled up to the gates of the Carter estate, Sophia hesitated. The mansion loomed before her, its marble pillars glowing in the moonlight, the kind of house people dreamed of owning. But to her, it no longer felt like home. It was a gilded cage, and tonight, the cage had snapped shut. She stepped out slowly, clutching her stomach. The driver offered to help, but she shook her head. Pride wouldn't let her lean on anyone. She walked up the long driveway alone, each step echoing her emptiness. Inside, the mansion was silent. No staff lingered. No warm lights greeted her. The rooms, usually so meticulously staged for Damien's guests, felt cold and hollow. She collapsed onto the velvet couch in the living room, her body trembling. Tears spilled freely now. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing for everything she had lost. Her dignity, her marriage, the life she thought she had built. She cried for her mother, who had warned her once that charm without respect was poison. She cried for the little girl she had been, the one who dreamed of love, only to grow into a woman humiliated by the very man she trusted most. Her phone buzzed on the table. Messages poured in. Headlines, gossip links, concerned notes from distant acquaintances who hadn't spoken to her in years, but now wanted to bask in the drama. She couldn't bring herself to read them. She turned the phone face down, as though ignoring it would erase the humiliation. But she couldn't ignore the voice in her head. How could he do this to me? How could he do this to our baby? The memory of Damien's foot striking her, of Elena's smirk, replayed again and again until she felt sick. She rushed to the bathroom, retching violently, gripping the porcelain sink for support. When it was over, she stared at her reflection. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. She barely recognized herself. "This isn't me," she whispered hoarsely. But the truth was brutal. It was her. She was the broken wife who had been kicked in public, who had walked away with tears streaming down her face while the world watched. For days, she barely left her bedroom. The curtains stayed closed. The meals the staff left at her door remained untouched. She lay curled on the bed, one hand always on her belly, whispering apologies to her unborn child. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to feel that pain." The tabloids feasted on her silence. Paparazzi camped outside the gates, hungry for the next photograph. Opinion pieces filled newspapers, some condemning Damien, others blaming her. Strangers online debated her life like it was entertainment. Why did she even show up at the gala? She knew he had a mistress. What did she expect? She should leave him, but she won't. Women like her never do. Every cruel comment dug deeper into her wounds. She felt stripped bare, dissected for the world's amusement. She wanted to vanish, to disappear into the shadows and never be seen again. At night, sleep didn't come. Instead, memories haunted her. The early days when Damien brought her coffee, the way he looked at her when they said their vows, the nights they dreamed about their future. Was it all a lie? Or had the man she loved truly become a stranger? Her body ached, not just from pregnancy but from despair. She stopped brushing her hair, stopped answering the phone, stopped caring about anything beyond keeping her baby safe. Days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. One evening, she stood in the nursery. The room was painted a soft sky blue, the crib Damien had ordered sitting in the corner, untouched. A tiny blanket embroidered with the baby's name lay folded neatly on the rocking chair. Sophia ran her fingers across the fabric, her tears dripping onto the thread. For the first time, a terrifying thought entered her mind. Maybe they'd be better off without me. Maybe I'm too weak to raise this child alone. The thought sent a chill through her. She shook her head violently, clutching her stomach. "No, I can't think like that. I won't." but the darkness lingered. She felt trapped between despair and responsibility, between the urge to collapse and the need to survive. One morning, as she sat by the window staring at nothing, her phone buzzed again. She ignored it, but a few moments later, it buzzed once more, and again. Frustrated, she finally reached for it. It wasn't gossip this time. It was a message from an unknown number. "Sophia, I saw what happened. You don't deserve this. Meet me. I can help." Her breath caught. She read it again and again. The number wasn't saved, but something about the message felt urgent, real. Could it be a trap? A journalist fishing for a story? Or was it someone who truly cared? She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. Then another message came. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let them break you. Tomorrow, noon, Cafe Verona." Sophia's heart raced. Someone out there believed in her. Someone who thought she wasn't finished. But who? For the first time since the gala, a spark flickered inside her. She didn't know who was waiting at Cafe Verona. She didn't know if she could trust them. But she knew one thing: she couldn't keep drowning in despair. And the moment she decided to step out of the shadows, the tide of her story began to turn. The following morning, sunlight streamed into the mansion for the first time in days. Sophia hadn't opened the curtains herself, the staff must have, but she didn't stop them. Something in her had shifted since the mysterious text. She no longer wanted to sit in darkness. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy dress that hid her swollen belly but gave her enough strength to face the outside world. As she looked in the mirror, she saw the traces of despair still etched in her face, but beneath them was something new: resolve. At noon, she arrived at Cafe Verona, a small, elegant spot tucked away on a quiet street. It was the kind of place where deals were whispered over cappuccinos and secrets exchanged between the clink of porcelain cups. She walked in cautiously, her eyes scanning the room, and then she saw him. At a corner table sat a man she hadn't seen in years, Michael Torres, her childhood friend. He stood immediately when he saw her, his dark eyes filled with both concern and warmth. Michael had grown from the boy she remembered into a man with the kind of confidence that came from success earned, not inherited. "Sophia," he said softly, pulling out a chair for her. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through. I saw everything." She sat down, her hands trembling slightly. "Everyone saw." Michael shook his head. "Everyone saw, but no one acted. That's what makes me sick. He humiliated you in front of the world, and they all let it happen." Sophia lowered her gaze. "Because he's powerful. And I'm just his wife." Michael leaned closer. "You're not just his wife, you're Sophia, and I think you've forgotten who you really are." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" Michael pulled out a folder from his leather briefcase. Inside were papers, photographs, and financial statements. "Damien thinks he owns everything, but I've been following his trail for months. His empire isn't as bulletproof as he makes it seem. He's reckless, Sophia. He's been using company funds for his affair with Elena, laundering money through shell corporations, bribing officials. I have evidence, solid evidence." Her breath caught. She stared at the documents, her heart pounding. "Why? Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve justice. And because if you want to fight back, you can't do it with tears. You need power. This," he tapped the folder, "is power." Sophia's mind raced. For months she had felt powerless, trapped in Damien's world, suffocating under his control. But here, for the first time, was proof that he wasn't untouchable. He could bleed. Michael's voice softened. "I know you, Sophia. You've always been stronger than you realize. Damien built his empire on your sacrifices. You stood by him when no one else did. And now he thinks he can throw you away like garbage? No, you don't have to let him. We can bring him down." She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the table. Part of her still wanted to run, to hide, to protect her baby from more chaos. But another part, the part that had been humiliated in front of flashing cameras, was rising. "What do I have to do?" she asked quietly. Michael smiled faintly. "First, take care of yourself. The baby comes first. But once you're ready, we'll move. We'll leak the right documents to the press. We'll alert the authorities. And when the time is right, we'll expose Damien for what he really is." Sophia's hands tightened around the folder. She imagined Damien's smug face, Elena's cruel smirk, the crowd's silence as she cried out in pain. Rage simmered inside her, no longer a wild fire but a steady, controlled burn. "I won't let him get away with this," she whispered. "Not anymore." Over the next few weeks, Sophia transformed. She still carried the wounds of humiliation, but now they fueled her instead of breaking her. She began seeing a doctor regularly, ensuring her baby was safe. She met with lawyers Michael recommended, discreetly preparing for divorce. And late at night, when the mansion was silent, she studied the evidence Michael had given her. Damien, meanwhile, continued flaunting Elena. He brushed off the scandal as overblown gossip, paid off reporters, and charmed investors with promises of new ventures. But behind his arrogance, cracks were forming. Whispers of mismanagement began circulating. Rumors of his temper leaked, and quietly Sophia's team pushed the right documents into the right hands. One morning, Damien stormed into the mansion, his face red with fury. "What the hell are you doing, Sophia?" he shouted. She looked up from the breakfast table, her calm composure unsettling him. "Eating breakfast? Why?" "Don't play games with me. Someone's leaking my financial records. My investors are calling non-stop. Do you know anything about this?" Sophia held his gaze steadily. Maybe the truth has a way of finding its own light. His eyes narrowed. For the first time he seemed unsure, even rattled. "You think you can fight me? You're nothing without me." Sophia stood slowly, her hand resting on her belly. "No, Damien, I was everything before you. And you're about to learn that I'm not the one who's nothing. You are." His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He stormed out, barking orders at his assistant. Sophia sat back down, her lips curling into the faintest smile. The tide was turning. Still, doubt gnawed at her in quiet moments. Could she really defeat him? Could she protect her baby while dismantling his empire? Or would Damien strike back with the kind of vengeance that could destroy her completely? Late one night, she stood on the balcony, the city lights glowing like stars beneath her. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I will not let him win." Behind her, the phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. "Everything is set. Tomorrow, the first story breaks." Sophia turned, her eyes fierce, her voice steady, because tomorrow was the beginning of Damien Carter's downfall. The morning headlines struck Damien like a thunderbolt. Billionaire Damien Carter under investigation for fraud. Luxury empire built on lies? Insider claims Carter funneled millions to Mistress. The front page of every major newspaper carried his face, not smiling in triumph at a gala, but scowling as he shoved his pregnant wife in front of flashing cameras. The image had gone viral, Damien's foot raised, Sophia clutching her stomach, Elena smirking in the background. It was damning, and now the financial records leaked by Michael only added fuel to the fire. Investors panicked. Shares of Carter Holdings plummeted. Board members who once praised Damien now whispered about betrayal. Lawsuits piled up, and the authorities launched a full investigation into his finances. For the first time in his life, Damien wasn't in control. Meanwhile, Sophia stood quietly at the center of the storm she had unleashed. She had chosen not to hide anymore. On the day the first exposé aired, she appeared on national television, composed, dignified, and glowing with the strength she had nearly forgotten she possessed. She wore a simple black dress, her baby bump visible, her voice steady. "I stayed silent for too long," she told the interviewer. "But silence only protects abusers. My husband humiliated me, betrayed me, and endangered me and my unborn child. He believed I was powerless, but women are never powerless, not when they decide to rise." Her words reverberated across the country. Social media exploded with support. Thousands of women shared their own stories under the hashtag #RiseWithSophia. What had begun as humiliation was now a movement. Damien watched the broadcast from his penthouse, his hands shaking as he hurled a glass against the wall. Elena tried to soothe him, but even she looked uneasy. The man she had attached herself to was slipping, and with him, so was her chance at the life she craved. "Don't worry," Damien growled. "I'll fix this. She doesn't know who she's dealing with." But for once, he was wrong. The following week, Sophia filed for divorce. Unlike the timid woman he thought he had broken, she came armed with lawyers, evidence, and public opinion on her side. The courtroom overflowed with reporters, cameras flashing as she walked in with her head high. Damien sneered across the aisle, but his smirk faltered when Sophia's attorneys laid out the case. The fraud, the embezzlement, the abuse. Document after document was presented, each one a nail in the coffin of his empire. Elena's name appeared in the evidence too. Records of lavish gifts purchased with stolen company money, photographs of luxury trips billed as business expenses, and even texts where she bragged about bleeding him dry. She sat in the gallery, her face pale as her name became synonymous with scandal. When the judge asked Sophia if she had anything to say, she rose slowly. "I gave Damien everything," she said, her voice strong. "My youth, my loyalty, my love. And he repaid me with betrayal and violence. I stand here today not as a victim, but as a mother, a woman, and a survivor. I won't let him define me. I will define myself." The courtroom erupted in applause, something rarely seen in such a setting. The judge silenced the crowd but couldn't hide her own look of respect. The divorce was granted swiftly. Sophia won full custody of her child, significant assets, and the Carter estate itself. Damien left the courthouse not as a billionaire titan but as a disgraced man, stripped of his empire and his reputation. Elena didn't fare better. With her name plastered across headlines, she became unemployable. Friends who once laughed at her jokes avoided her calls. She had hitched her future to Damien's fortune. And when it crumbled, so did she. Within months, she disappeared from the social scene entirely. For Sophia, however, life blossomed. She poured her energy into charities for women and children, using part of her settlement to create shelters for those fleeing abuse. Her story inspired thousands, and she became a symbol of resilience. One evening, months after the trial, Sophia sat on the porch of her estate, her baby boy cradled in her arms. The night air was calm, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Michael stepped outside, setting 2 mugs of tea on the table. "You did it," he said quietly. Sophia smiled down at her son. "No," she whispered, kissing the baby's forehead. "We did it. He gave me a reason to fight, and I'll never stop fighting. For him, for myself, for every woman who's been told she's powerless." The baby stirred softly, as if comforted by her words. Sophia leaned back, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Damien and Elena were nothing but shadows now. Their laughter, their arrogance, their cruelty, gone. What remained was Sophia's strength, forged in the fire of humiliation and reborn as something indestructible. Her revenge had not just destroyed them, it had rebuilt her. And as the world looked on, Sophia proved a truth no one could ever erase. When a woman rises, she cannot be stopped. All right, my friend, so the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a way words alone can't explain. Sophia's story wasn't just about betrayal and revenge. It was about resilience, about rediscovering strength when the world tries to break you. Life often hands us moments of humiliation, of pain, of silence, when we expect others to stand for us and they don't. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Sophia found that strength. She turned despair into dignity, shame into power, and heartbreak into healing. And so can you. Sometimes the people closest to us betray us. Sometimes the crowd stays silent when we need them to speak. But Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And Sophia chose to rise. She chose not to let Damien define her story. Instead, she rewrote it with courage, with love for her child, and with an unshakable belief that she was more than her pain. And maybe, just maybe, you needed to hear that today. That whatever storm you're facing, it doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something greater. So, my wonderful friends, if you felt even a spark of strength through this story, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope tonight, and subscribe to this channel so we can keep walking through these stories together. Because no matter how dark the night, remember, a woman or a man who chooses to rise cannot be stopped.